Weather on News Radio KMAN is brought to you by the Flint Hills Discovery Center. Host your next event or holiday party at the Discovery Center. Visit FlintHillsDiscovery.org for more information.
Your News Radio KMAN Manhattan area forecast is calling for it to be breezy and sunny. 47 the high today. Clear 26 overnight. It's going to be beautiful for the Spirit of the Holidays lighted parade getting underway at 5:30 this evening down points. Sunshine breezy again tomorrow. 60 for the high. Clear 38 tomorrow night. Back to 60 and breezy on Sunday. Winds shift to the northwest after midnight Sunday night and start to cool us back into the 40s by midweek.
Digging deeper into the conversations, trends, and ideas impacting Manhattan and the Flint Hills. This is Within Reason with Mike Matson on News Radio KMAN.
There is a component of American society that drives economic growth, innovation, and job creation. It is called the private sector. It's men, women, and families who earn their living in their own businesses and employ others in the process. It's powered by free market principles. It thrives on competition, entrepreneurship, and investment. The private sector is alive and well in Kansas. There is always room for improvement. Today we'll find out what's being done to make things better with our guest, Alan Cobb. He is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Kansas Chamber. Within Reason is presented by Stormont Vale Health, by McCown Gordon Construction, and the Trust Company. We're live on News Radio KMAN, live streaming on YouTube. You can go to that website and search News Radio KMAN. And we're being recorded and will be posted as a podcast on the KMAN website and made available wherever you get web podcasts. So depending upon how you consume us, we are either a live radio show that becomes a podcast, or we are a podcast that originates as a live radio show, one way or another. You can make the case that the Kansas Chamber is the most influential private sector promoting organization in the state. They represent business interests across the board, from mom-and-pop Main Street merchants to aircraft manufacturers who employ thousands, and everything in between. Alan Cobb is their president and CEO. Alan, welcome to Within Reason.
Very happy to be here, Mike.
We're delighted that you've joined us. The first thing we always ask our guests is to give us sort of the Alan Cobb 101.
Sure. I should have put a little more thought into this. I'm a native of Wichita. I was born in Missouri, but I only lived there for 6 weeks.
We'll still claim you.
So I was adopted by a family from Marion, and by the time I was around, we were in Wichita in Valley Center. Wichita State graduate, and have been at the Chamber almost 8 years. Worked for Koch Industries, worked for Senator Dole, like thousands of Kansans. There are thousands of Dole alumni out there, and have had a pretty interesting mixed career in politics and policy.
Help us understand what the Kansas Chamber is and what you do.
We're a business advocacy organization, and there's really two sides to the advocacy. One is direct lobbying the legislature, the governor, agencies, and to pass bills that we want and to defeat bills we don't want. And then there's lots of things that we get engaged with agencies. And the other, I guess I'd call it soft advocacy. We had last month a Women in Business conference in Topeka with almost 300 folks. We have a Coolest Thing Made in Kansas contest every fall, coolest innovations. I look at that, the soft advocacy of promoting businesses and promoting and celebrating businesses and business leaders.
Fair enough. All designed clearly for your membership, the business folks that we mentioned earlier, that sort of that cross the spectrum of businesses in Kansas, all designed to help them improve their bottom lines, to figure out how they can earn more money, to create more wealth, to fulfill their needs, to help the community and move forward.
Correct. I like quoting former President Obama that the free enterprise system is the single best way to alleviate poverty.
Let's talk about where we are in Kansas with respect to the economy. In fact, just this morning, nationally, the jobs report came out for November, and it indicated we're up a couple 100,000 jobs from the previous month. Are we feeling that in Kansas?
We are doing okay. It could be much, much better. It could be worse. You look at states that are actually losing population. I think we might have lost population one of the COVID years, but several states did. And we're in a competitive world, in a competitive country with 50 states that are all trying to grow their economy and recruit businesses. said we're doing okay. Depends on what metrics. You can look at private sector job growth, GDP per capita income. We're usually somewhere in the middle on all those. And sometimes our top 10 ranking is a good thing. Sometimes we might be ranked top 10 and it's not.
Fair enough. When you look at the work that is done within Kansas and within organizations to recruit new businesses to our state, you guys really don't do that.
Correct.
That is a job that is left to the state governments.
You have State Department of Commerce. You have local economic development groups. I sometimes they are the local chambers. I should know this, whether it's Manhattan Chamber, whether the Manhattan Chamber does the economic development too. It depends on the community.
Right. Here in Manhattan, the Manhattan Chamber does that work on a contract for the local city government,
yes,
which is also a best practice in that sort of
correct
work. So your job is not to go out and literally buttonhole companies to say come to Kansas, but rather to create an environment among the business community to allow good things to happen.
Correct. And also for the existing companies to be able to grow. I do think recruiting is a good thing. There's no question about it. But sometimes I wonder if the collective, we put more emphasis on recruiting than our current businesses. We're unlikely to recruit our way to growth because we have about 1.5 million employees in Kansas. So if you think even the Panasonic plant in DeSoto, it's going to be 4,000. That's a lot of jobs. It doesn't move the needle on a 1.5 million jobs.
The Panasonic job, that is the jewel in the crown that Governor Kelly's administration likes to talk about. We had Governor Kelly on our very first show on October 14th. She was kind enough to make the trip over to visit with us about that. She wasn't shy about talking about that.
Yep.
And so that's a big deal, but it also creates other challenges related to infrastructure. There's a whole conversation underway over there about utilities and how they're going to get power and that sort of thing. So is it a wash at the end, or is it too early to tell?
Probably too early to tell. I think one of the challenges with incentives is the ROI, and are the state going to make some of the tax revenue back from what some of the incentives, and some of the recruitment deals work, some of them do not.
Our guest is Alan Cobb. He is the president and chief executive officer of the Kansas Chamber, that is the state's leading business lobby. We're talking about what they do, how they do it. Right now, he's already made the point that it makes more sense to spend a lot of time on existing businesses and maybe a little less time on actually recruiting new businesses with respect to how you grow the economy. When we come back after the break, we'll drill into each of those a little bit. We'll talk to Alan about some of the things they're involved with looking forward as they're wrapping up work on a strategic plan for 2030, which, when you look at the calendar, is tomorrow.
Yes.
Stay with us. Within Reason will continue on News Radio KMAN.
This is Within Reason with Mike Matson on News Radio KMAN.
Tired of sleepless nights and waking up feeling exhausted? If you suffer from sleep apnea or snoring, Downtown Dental Group has a solution. Oral appliance therapy is FDA approved and covered by PPO and Medicare. No invasive surgery and no drugs. Just a custom-fitted, comfortable device that's easy to wear. These discreet retainer-like devices eliminate loud snoring in 90% of patients. Start enjoying restful nights and energized days. Visit downtowndentalmanhattan.com or call them at 785-776-0097 to book your consultation today. Sleep better, live better.
Make Blueville Nursery Garden Store your Christmas shopping headquarters. With our wide array of decor, gardening supplies, and more, we have something for everyone on your list. We also have Christmas trees, live greens, wreaths, and poinsettias to give your home a festive feel this holiday season. We'd like to thank all of our customers for another great year. Blueville Garden Store is open Tuesday through Saturday, 9 to 4. Come give us a visit at Blueville Nursery, where you'll always find the friendly smile and expert advice. Located at the corner of Scenic Drive and Anderson and Manhattan.
Manhattan Broadcasting is keeping it local. Dollars spent locally today help build a better community for tomorrow.
D&I Plumbing, Heating, and Air will provide honest and quality service when you need it most. From a leaky faucet to replacing your water heater. Trust the experts at D&I Plumbing, Heating, and Air, your York and other makes and models local dealer. Call 537-7138 today.
Give a gift that will last a lifetime this holiday season. Let Candlewood Frame Shop frame a picture or create a shadow box. Just bring in your favorite memories and let them help you with the perfect gift. Candlewood Frame Shop in Manhattan, turning your memories into a masterpiece.
For a once-in-a-lifetime experience, engagement ring shopping simply can't be duplicated on a computer screen. At Fifely Jewelers, you'll be pleasantly surprised by our pricing compared to buying online, and we offer financing. Plus, you'll have peace of mind by shopping locally with Fifely Jewelers.
Manhattan Broadcasting is keeping it local. Find more great local businesses plus special deals and offers when you keep it local on our website. Stormont Vale Health is your go-to for exceptional care right in your own neighborhood.
The Flint Hills campus in Junction City is open 24/7 with a full-service hospital and rural health clinic. You'll find primary care and advanced lab services at our Wamego clinic to keep your family healthy without the drive. Our Manhattan campus offers a wide range of primary and specialty providers, plus imaging and lab services, and a pick-me-up at Radina's inside our campus. Visit stormontvale.org.
Stormont Vale Health. High-quality care closer to home.
Are you sick and tired of waiting on an endless phone queue to get questions answered? Would you like to speak to a real-life person here in town versus someone in a different country? Sound like a novel concept? Well, it isn't. Come bank with Community First National Bank, and we give you all that and more. We have the friendliest people, great deposit and loan rates, great technology, a huge customer appreciation party each year, and a personality that puts all those other posers to shame. Come see why we're different than the other banks. Community First National Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
The Ramsey Show.
The problem is the stupid banks will loan you so much money that they put you in bankruptcy because they don't have an off button. They'll just loan you money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can go get a credit card, you can go on a trip you can't afford, you can go down here and get a car. You know, there's actually people out there walking around that still think that if the bank will loan it to you, it means you can pay
afford it.
The same people that think if you have checks left in your checkbook, there must be money in the account.
Mm-hmm.
Same people.
Life and money advice. The Ramsey Show. Weekdays from 10 to 1 on News Radio KMAN. This is Within Reason with Mike Matson on News Radio KMAN.
Our guest is Alan Cobb. He is the president and chief executive officer of the Kansas Chamber, which is the largest business advocacy organization in the state, and they have membership right here in Manhattan in every community in the state, all 105 counties, I'm confident.
80.
All 80. Okay, so
80
you have some
105.
work to do yet.
Yes.
Okay, clearly. And speaking of work that needs to be done, you guys are just wrapping up some public meetings related
Correct.
to thinking about the future. I think it's Strategic Vision 2030.
It's our Vision 2030 about the future of the state's economy and who ought to be in charge of the future, which is kind of a very broad term. And we think the private sector ought to be in charge. Elected leaders are very important, but they come and go, whether it's term limits or getting voted in or voting out. And sometimes their incentives are a little different than a group like the Chamber that wants the entire state to grow. So the feedback has been helpful. They were all virtual, but they were somewhat geographic. The feedback was relatively consistent. We rank pretty good in infrastructure, and infrastructure is not just roads and bridges, but it's internet, it's water, it's rail. And we rank fairly well, and most of the feedback was good, but there are some concerns in southwest Kansas about the lack of 4 lanes and passing lanes because they have a much higher percent of their traffic being truck traffic.
Well, in southwest Kansas specifically, right?
Correct.
The business out there are large agribusinesses. There's dairies, there's feedlots, which just implies big trucks.
Correct, and grain, and so that it makes it a little bit more challenging if you're in a car trying to get around.
Fair enough. Let's talk a little bit about the Strategic Vision 2030 and your point that business needs to drive the agenda versus elected leaders. And I think your point, Alan, is that business leaders are here to stay.
Correct.
And politicians come and go. What do your business leader members tell you about what that needs to look like?
Well, it's nothing terribly complicated. You got to look at the cost of doing business, and that's everything: utility rates, healthcare cost, legal costs, legal liability, of course, taxes, and and also then getting out of the way and letting businesses do what they do. Kansas is better than most states on the regulatory front, but we could be better.
We're a very unique state politically in that we are not shy about electing Democratic governors. If you go back the last 20, 30 years, we've elected a number of Democratic governors, but we are one of the reddest states in the nation just in terms of how people break down. Does that impact the work that you do? Or here's a better question. How does that impact the work that you do?
It does impact. It probably makes it a little bit more difficult when you have a Democratic governor. I have a good relationship with Governor Kelly and her team. I think these are honorable folks with good intents, but she sure vetoes a lot of bills, and a lot of bills that that we would have liked to have seen. And so that just makes it a little bit more difficult. You look at the back and forth last year on tax cuts, income tax cuts, and if you look at and so we did have a small income tax cut. If you look at not just the states that surround us, but the states that surround those states. So I think it's 16, 17 states. It goes all the way to Utah and Arizona because they border Colorado. You go to Arkansas, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee because they border Missouri. You look at South Dakota and Iowa. We're the second highest top income tax rate in that whole 17-state region next to New Mexico. And so most of all those other states are in the 4s. We're at 5.6 or 5.55. And that is a competitive issue. It's not everything. And one thing I do hear from local economic development or developers, well, they've not lost a deal because of the income tax rates. The challenge I have back to them is, but you're not even getting those phone calls when the income tax is a major issue.
Because they'll see those numbers, they'll see that we're higher than our competing states nearby and just move on to that.
Correct. But again, that's not everything, and I think the governor and Lieutenant Governor Tolan have done a good job on recruiting. Again, the challenge is let's not forget about the existing.
Our guest is Alan Cobb. He's the president and chief executive officer of the Kansas Chamber, and we're talking just a little bit about how they do their work and how they get involved in that work. Clearly a huge presence in Topeka. The legislative sessions is, if 2030 is tomorrow, that means that the 2025 legislative session will start in about 10 minutes.
Correct.
Right. So when you guys look at what you've got lined up for January, what's on the docket?
We're looking at income tax and property tax reductions. Property tax is a little trickier for the legislature to engage because it's so driven by local government. And there are some things that can be done. There is a statewide mill levy that's for schools. Well, it's ostensibly for schools, but the money just goes into the general treasury. So you could cut that mill levy, and schools are still going to be funded. So we're going to take a look at that. We're going to continue to look at regulatory reform. Some ideas that are out there that are percolating. I know it's just 6 weeks away.
10 minutes away.
Yeah, 10 minutes away, you're right. Looking at setting a numerical goal. We have about 81,000 regulations in Kansas, and I think there's general agreement, relatively nonpartisan. We don't need all of those. Well, then let's set a numerical goal to reduce those, let's say, to 70,000. Now, we've got to make sure we're not getting rid of regulations that actually are protecting the public, but I don't think that's going to be that difficult. Looking at sales tax as an example, our retailers are sales tax collection agents for the state. Well, they probably ought to be reimbursed something for that because it's a big benefit to the state, and a lot of other states reimburse their retailers.
There's a conversation underway here in Manhattan in the business community about this notion of regulation, especially as it relates to local government. So it's not a unique conversation at the state level. And my guess would be that business people across the board look at government regulation as, let's create aspects that will keep us safe, but let's do it within reason.
Correct. And sometimes you do it within reason, or let's get rid of this regulation. This is not helping the public. One of the challenges also is just the multiple state agencies that a business might have to go through, and are there way to get a permit, as an example, and that's local and state government. Can we look at consolidation so that it's much easier? You don't need examples. Child care is a big business issue, and you've got 4, 5, 6 different state agencies that have to give approval. You've got things like the fire marshal. You've got the Department of Ag because if they serve food. Last year, there was a proposal to consolidate those, get rid of duplication. However, the person that proposed it, there were no changes in the FTEs, full-time equivalents,
right,
even though there was getting rid of duplications. Well, why is that?
But it's an example. Our guest is Alan Cobb, the president and CEO of the Kansas Chamber. The child care regulation example that you just touched on is sort of a good way to look at how laws get created. Right, it takes a while. Right, that conversation started because of a legitimate need for more child care slots.
Correct.
Right, for mothers and fathers and families to figure out a way to keep the kids safe while they're working, earning a living. Right, and then that led to the point where the legislature gets involved because they see it as a policy issue. That leads to conversations about consolidation. These things don't happen overnight.
They don't, and sometimes it takes the right amount of political pressure and pressure from the public to get some things done. We have made some progress. sometimes it can be difficult. Like childcare, the ratios of kids to workers, Kansas was unusually low, meaning, but you don't, it's a tough message saying, well, we're going to have more kids for each childcare worker. Oh, well, then it's not safe. But I guess it's an equivalent of like most municipal water supply has arsenic in it, but it's not enough to hurt you. So how do you have those productive conversations?
Fair enough. And it's one of those things that you know in your career that if you start the conversation now about regulation on business writ large, right, and you create a narrative and you start that conversation in Topeka and it becomes sort of a drumbeat, 3 or 4 years from now, it could actually happen.
Correct. And there was a constitutional amendment a couple of years ago that failed, but it came closer than I would have thought, that would allow the legislature make it easier to repeal regulation. So it was pretty common sense in my view, and so we're still looking at things we can do statutorily instead of a constitutional amendment.
Our guest is Alan Cobb. He is the president and chief executive officer of the Kansas Chamber. They are a private sector business lobby based in Topeka, and they do work in Topeka. They do work in Washington. We talked earlier in this conversation about just some of the way that your work is evolving as society evolves, right? In Kansas, the word infrastructure used to sort of denote roads and highways, and we're pretty proud of our roads and highways in Kansas, right? But anymore, that involves more than just bricks and mortar.
It definitely does. It's certainly rail, too, but it's also internet and broadband. And Kansas is actually doing fairly well on that front. There are pockets of the state in the more rural areas that's an area of improvement. And then our water infrastructure is pretty good. Now, water is a longer-term issue. You've got the Ogallala Aquifer issue in southwest Kansas or western Kansas. But even in eastern Kansas, where we get enough rainfall, the reservoirs are silting in. And that's the source of a lot of communities' water. And so it's not cheap. And so we're going to have to take a hard look at that.
Well, it doesn't take long for issues like that, right? Yeah, that is, when you think of the silting in of Tuttle Creek Lake here in Manhattan, north of town, just a stone's throw from my wife and I's new home, right? When you think of that, I don't automatically think, well, surely the Kansas Chamber is going to get involved in that, but it doesn't take long to realize that you guys are dealing with stuff across the spectrum in terms of issues.
We are. We try to be disciplined on where can we be a difference maker individually at the Chamber, but that the availability of water, availability of electricity, these are nuts and bolts business issues. So we do engage when we think we can make a difference on a variety of issues, but there's a lot of things that impact the ability to hire and grow a business.
Let's talk about that for just a second. What are some of the major barriers right now that employers are facing?
Lack of workers.
Let's talk about that. That's just bodies. That is
Correct.
Human beings.
Correct.
How do you fix that?
Boy, that's a tough one. It's interesting that the Kansans rate our quality of life pretty good, pretty high. And so it's not a quality of life issue. It's somewhat demographic. Every state's going through this. This has been an issue that I've been engaged with in my 7.5 years at the Chamber, and every state chamber is. So have to make the state look that much more attractive to the employee. I would say income taxes could be a part of that. Mm-hmm. This is anecdotal, but there are examples of employees leaving Kansas for Texas. Texas doesn't have an income tax. So not the business, but it's the individual. And it can make a big difference. And have to make sure that our educational institutions are doing what they need to do. We're pretty good. We probably have too many, but they produce pretty good graduates from associate level, from certificate to associate to bachelor to PhD.
So will the marketplace take care of that? We have 19 community colleges in Kansas. At some point, will just the demographics catch up?
I would sure think so. And it's just a math issue. And are those local communities, with the community colleges in particular, are they still willing to pay those higher mill levies? And so far, I mean, we have the 19. There hasn't been one that's closed.
Right.
Now there have been some proposals for affiliations that fell through. Dodge City was going to affiliate with Fort Hays, Fort Scott with Pittsburgh State. This is in the last decade. And I think the locals in Fort Scott and Dodge City they didn't want to give up their kind of ownership and give up control.
Not in my backyard.
Yeah. Now, it has happened with the tech colleges, though.
Right.
You look at
yes.
Wichita State Tech,
Yep.
Washburn Tech, and then last year, Northwest Kansas Tech is in Goodland, North Central's in Beloit. They are affiliated with Fort Hays.
And there's conversations underway here. We've had Rich Linton, K-State president, on this program. We've had Jim Janant on this. He's the president of Manhattan Area Technical College. And they're pretty proud of what they're doing. And so their conversations are underway. But it's like the thing we talked about earlier. You have to start the conversation.
Correct.
Then you have to create the narrative. Then you have to create ways to move that forward. And that's all about collaboration, which I assume is a huge part of the way you guys try to get stuff done.
Absolutely. And you want to get the interested parties, and do you have the dialogue and come to an agreement on a best path forward. And it's not change for change's sake, but you have to look at what's the landscape across the country, what's happening other places, where are we falling down. As mentioned, that's our Vision 2030. One thing I wanted to mention back on data, one of the things we do really, really well is we're really, really productive. We're usually top 10 in GDP per capita. Part of that is our industry mix. Manufacturing continues to be productive, and ag. You need fewer and fewer people. As an example, when I was at Wichita State in the 80s, Boeing Wichita had 25,000 employees. Today, Spirit Air Systems is essentially doing everything Boeing Wichita did and probably more with 15,000. And it's just
technology.
But they could still hire. They would gladly hire more people if they were available with the right skill sets, et cetera.
I am entirely too close to this to be objective because I'm a native Kansan. But there's a work ethic that we have in Kansas that you don't necessarily find on the coasts. Fair?
No question about it. And one of the other things, our labor participation rate is among the top 10, meaning we have more people that are in the labor pool actually working. And so that's a good thing. I think there's some data to back up the work ethic, not just what you and I think.
Well, and it's all part of generations and decades of culture, right? That sort of define the middle of the country and the lifestyle and the culture that we have inherited from our ancestors.
Correct.
Fair enough. Our guest is Alan Cobb. He is the president and chief executive officer of the Kansas Chamber, which is arguably the state's most influential lobby, clearly the state's biggest and most influential private sector business lobby. We'll take a break, but when we come back, we'll visit with Alan a little bit about some of the things that they are involved with and the agendas that they are pushing at the federal level in Washington. Stay with us. My name is Mike Matson. The program is Within Reason, and you're listening to us on News Radio KMAN.
This is Within Reason with Mike Matson on News Radio KMAN.
This holiday season, let G. Thomas Jewelers help you give the gift that keeps on shining. Since 1963, G. Thomas Jewelers has loved being a part of your cherished moments, from heartfelt proposals to unforgettable holiday surprises. With 2 convenient locations now to serve you, they can help you craft the perfect gift for your loved one. So this holiday season, get your loved one something that will last a lifetime. Give them the gift that sparkles from G. Thomas Jewelers, located at 419 Points in Manhattan and also at 628 North Washington Street in Junction City.
Nestled in the heart of Wamego, there's a place where every dish tastes like it's straight out of Grandma's kitchen, maybe even better. Welcome to Friendship House, where we pride ourselves on cooking up comfort with a touch of heart. At Friendship House, we start early each morning chopping, mixing, and baking. Why? Because we believe in the magic of food made from scratch. From our savory soups to our sweet, crusty apple pies, every bite tells a story of tradition and craft. Gather around our tables or order for takeout for a taste of nostalgia, whether it's a family dinner, a catch-up with old friends, or a quiet afternoon all to yourself. You're always home at Friendship House. Join us for daily breakfast and lunch that promises a variety of deliciousness and a touch of home with every bite. It's comfort food that warms the soul. Visit Friendship House today in Wamego. Just like Grandma's cooking, if not better, we're here ready to serve you a plate of homemade happiness. See you at Friendship House, where every meal is made with love, just like Grandma. Friendship House, just off the Yellow Brick Road in the heart of Wamego.
After facing a multitude of challenges since 2020, Flint Hills Area Transportation Agency has decided to evaluate the current system and seek out the current needs and wants of the local communities to guide a path forward. Your input is vital. Flint Hills Autobus needs your help. Get involved and share your input to help guide Autobus so they can provide more convenient and efficient connections to jobs, services, and educational opportunities. Take the survey by going to fhata.org/study.
Hi, I'm Jeremy from Pawnee Mental Health. Suicide isn't easy to talk about, but it's a conversation that can save lives. If you or someone you care about is struggling, please reach out. Call or text 988 to connect with the National Suicide Crisis Line, or contact Pawnee's Crisis Stabilization Unit at 1-800 609-2002. You don't have to face this alone. Let's talk, because reaching out can save a life.
Mahomes has a pass for the left side. It is caught. Touchdown! Floating it up to Justin Watson. And now Patrick Mahomes has set the all-time Kansas City Chiefs record, besting the late, great Lenny Dawson.
Next up, the LA Chargers come to GEHA Field at Arrowhead to face the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. Pre-game starts at 6 on your home for Kansas City Chiefs football.
Manhattan's home for the Chiefs. News Radio KMAN.
This is Within Reason with Mike Matson on News Radio KMAN.
Today wraps up 8 weeks of Within Reason here on KMAN, and we are delighted to be joined today by Alan Cobb. Alan is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Kansas Chamber, which is a Topeka-based advocacy organization that represents private sector businesses across the state. We mentioned earlier on your membership ranges from mom-and-pop Main Street merchants to great big manufacturers.
We do, and at very time, we have a retail council and a manufacturing council that are kind of subsets. We had our retail council board meeting yesterday virtually, and we have on that council the Helmsford store in Lindsborg. Mm-hmm. We have a Petland franchise in Topeka that's on it, and then we have Hy-Vee and Best Buy. So we really do run the gamut. We have family-owned insurance agencies, but then we also have Blue Cross Blue Shield. So small banks, big financial concerns. Good example, aerospace is a very interesting person who serves on our board. His family company has 8 employees. They make parts for the aircraft that then end up maybe in a Cessna citation at Textron Aviation that has 12 or 13,000 employees. So it really does run the gamut.
What's that mean for the work you do? How do you adequately and accurately represent both of those sorts of systems?
What I have found is the issues, whether you're small or large, the issues before the legislature are no different. And it's the things we've already mentioned, the cost of doing business, availability of workforce. And sometimes folks will, the chamber just represents the large businesses. Well, half our membership has 100 employees or less. So and most of them are headquartered in Kansas. But yes, we have other national companies that have a major presence here that are members. So.
Well, it's probably also important to point out you guys don't compete with local community chambers,
correct.
Right? It's apples and bananas.
It's just different missions. They're not in conflict. I suppose it's kind of funny. I have a good relationship with the local chamber presidents, including Jason here in Manhattan. There's probably a teeny bit of not true competition, because we'll have some folks, prospective members, saying, well, our chamber money is going to go to the local chamber. And then I've heard from some local chambers that say, hey, we just lost a member because they said they feel like it's a duplication to be a member of the chamber locally and state chambers, which it's not. I usually say to a company, if you have to choose, go with the local. I mean, that's right there in your backyard. But we do have different missions that are not in conflict.
Well, and clearly you're a membership-driven organization.
Correct.
And so the policies that you guys espouse are not driven by the professional staff.
Correct.
They're driven by your membership.
Correct.
Which is the way an advocacy organization works. We had Terry Holdren on earlier this week. He's the CEO of Kansas Farm Bureau, and they're having their annual meeting this weekend here in Manhattan. And he was saying the same thing, right? It's family farmers and ranchers who come together and figure out what they need to do, and then their organization helps espouse for that. Same with you guys, clearly.
Our legislative agenda is put together by our members. We have task force in various issue areas, HR, legal, tax, etc. It's self-selected, so any company can be a member of every task force. They vote on the agenda. It's approved or amended by the executive committee and then the board. It's about as grassroots as you get. Not as grassroots as Farm Bureau. That nobody holds a candle to them. But
with 105 volunteer county boards of directors.
Yes. So and the agendas have, in my almost 8 years, rarely have been amended in any substantial way. And in fact, last year the only one was literally adding a word. Someone who was a real good wordsmith. And so it is driven by the members.
We like wordsmiths.
Yes,
we do in fact. So let's talk about your federal agenda, right? We got a brand new Trump administration coming, and I say brand new. We have enough data to understand the way he thinks, and we look at the people that he wants to appoint in these positions, and so the question is, when you look at who he wants to appoint as the trade rep, right? When you look at some of these other cabinet appointments that he is putting forth, the way he thinks about international trade, what's your level of concern with respect to making sure that your membership is represented there?
I don't know. How about that for an answer? It's not clear to me. I did serve on the Trump campaign, and I was part of the transition team in 2016, 2017.
The first time around.
First time, yeah. And I believe I think the rhetoric about tariffs are going to be a lot stronger than the actual tariff. That's my belief, because there's a math issue with that too. It will cause costs to go up, and he doesn't want that. I think he can use it kind of the bully pulpit that seems to have maybe working a little bit if you look at the rhetoric or listen to the rhetoric from the president of Mexico. But yes, if there was 25% tariffs across the board, that would be a problem, and it would hurt the economy.
That would clearly trickle down. That's not the right word, but that would eventually emanate down to local businesses.
No question.
And people who are part of your organization.
No question.
Let's talk about the Kansas congressional delegation. You'd mentioned earlier in your career, you had the great good fortune to work for Senator Bob Dole, and I think it was just yesterday was the anniversary of his death 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
Clearly a giant in Kansas political circles.
Well, U.S.
Well, and you look at
history.
You look at today's congressional delegation, Senators Moran and Marshall. What are your impressions of them at this point?
Both very, very positive. Look at, and maybe this will be tough to say in the backyard of K-State, Moran has done a ton for the universities in Kansas, and particularly Wichita State in aerospace. And it's the National Institute for Aviation Research is beating out MIT for contracts and research. So he's done a wonderful job. I think they both have their pulse on the state. I think with the Republicans in majority, it's good to have two Republican senators, and I think they both have a good relationship with the president.
Our sense of
President-elect.
Our sense of Senator Moran is that once Pat Roberts hung him up, Senator Moran grew very quickly into this role of dean of the delegation.
He did, and it's interesting just the way the politics of Kansas are, where they're both from rural areas, and so there hasn't really been an urban. In my view, we do not really have much of a rural-urban divide on things of substance. But I'll get back to the geography here in a second. But it's interesting. We haven't really had an urban senator from Topeka. Let's just say Topeka, Kansas City area, Wichita. Who would that been?
Senator Kassabaum, Wichita,
oh,
Mays.
Yes.
You could make that case, but that's 30 years ago.
Yeah, she was on the May School District, so that is essentially Wichita. So that's a good point. And I don't know that it doesn't matter, because I think both Senators Marshall and Moran do a terrific job of representing everybody in the state. I wanted to mention something. You said we're based out of Topeka, every state chamber and state capitals. But it's just funny how we look at the geography of the state. We were doing something similar on these town halls 5 years ago, and we were in Johnson County. And so one of the Johnson County local chamber execs said, well, I'll be very interested to hear what feedback you get from outstate Kansas. I said, yeah, you probably don't want to use that term. But we go out to Dodge City, and the folks said, well, we appreciate you guys from back east coming out here.
Doesn't take long.
Well, it's like we're not from Baltimore.
Right.
We're just in the capital.
Well, and again, as you know, Kansas, the demographics of our state are changing significantly, right? It hasn't been that long that actually 2000 was the first year in Kansas where urban and suburban Kansans outnumbered rural Kansans, and that's just a generation ago. And so that followed a century of those sort of population trends, and so it'll take another century to get to the point where you really see those differences. I suspect.
The four biggest counties are 51% of the state population. Right. That's Sedgwick, Shawnee, Wyandotte, and Johnson. So that doesn't count Riley, which is urban-ish. That doesn't count Douglas. And now the one thing, and I'll email this to you, and it may be worth talking about with one of your guests. Part of our Vision 2030, we've hired an economist, economic leadership, to look at projections, and the map is pretty fascinating. There are areas of growth over the next 5 to 10 years all over the state. So it's not just Sedgwick.
Right.
And in fact, it was interesting. Riley showed a little bit of a drop. Of course, a lot of the growth here is happening in Pot County.
Sure.
But it was encouraging. There were a lot of counties in all the geographic areas that look to have a population growth.
Our guest is Alan Cobb. He's the president and CEO of the Kansas Chamber. That conversation is underway here in Manhattan, as you're probably aware, Alan. And there's basically two schools of thought. One is looking at the numbers that military recruitment numbers from Fort Riley on a downward trend, K-State enrollment, big picture on a downward trend, although those might be coming back up a little bit. And for decades, this community sort of relied on those two government systems to sort of keep our economy going.
Yeah,
right?
good
And
point.
now that those numbers are down, there's a conversation underway that leads toward, well, maybe we need more private sector job growth. And then there's another conversation underway that says we really like things the way they are. I suspect you hear both of those.
Oh, yes. It's there's a lot of definition of being conservative, but one definition is not wanting change. That's not my definition of conservative, but they don't want the shining city on the hill. They like their town how it is. And I understand that, but I generally believe that if you're not growing, you're shrinking. I mean, nothing is status quo. And you've seen various towns in Kansas that's happened. You've seen various cities and states that's happened to across the country. And if you look at Rust Belt, et cetera. So it has to be, a lot of it comes down to local leadership and what are the local leaders wanting and willing to do.
Our guest is Alan Cobb. He is the president and CEO of the Kansas Chamber, and we're visiting with him about all things related to government relations and the business community. And it's no secret that in Kansas we have a strong private sector. The Kansas Chamber does their level best to represent them on a daily basis in Topeka and in Washington. We will continue our conversation with Alan as Within Reason continues. The Trust Company is an independent, locally owned wealth management and investment company founded right here in Manhattan in 1992. The motivation that drives your financial goals, your life, is unique to you and your family. You won't find boilerplate, template-driven, off-the-shelf financial services and strategies at the Trust Company, but plans that are thoughtfully and individually designed, tailored specifically to your hopes and dreams. The Trust Company, locally owned, client-focused. Their only allegiance is to you. Visit thetrustco.com.
This is Within Reason with Mike Matson on News Radio, KMAN.
If Kansas weather has taught us anything, it's to be prepared for everything. It's time to call M&S Plumbing, Heating and Air to make sure your furnace is ready. From full safety inspections to replacing your furnace, M&S Plumbing will keep you and your family warm this winter. If it's been a while since you've had your furnace serviced and inspected, be sure to call and schedule your appointment today. Simple fixes now can save you big money later.
Call the experts who care. M&S Plumbing, Heating and Air.
The secret to getting ahead is getting started. The words of Mark Twain. If you know what it's like to be behind and you're looking to get ahead for a change, it's Central Time. Open a new opportunity checking account with Central National Bank that makes finances easy. Account opening is subject to qualifications. Restrictions may apply.
Central National Bank, money for life.
Member FDIC. Money for getting started since 1884.
Oh no, stomach issues again?
Stomach issues? Who are you? Your pancreas. I could be the real reason for your diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, or loose oily stools.
I thought it was my stomach.
People often do, but any of these symptoms could mean having a condition called exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI. With EPI, the pancreas doesn't release enough enzymes to break down food, but EPI is manageable. Use the symptom checker on identifyepi.com and speak with your doctor. That's identifyepi.com. Sponsored by AbbVie.
This is the story of the one who, as a maintenance specialist for a historic high-rise, knows that vintage charm historically needs constant attention. Which is why, when it's time to upgrade turn-of-the-century mechanicals, they turn to Grainger. With easy access to 1 million-plus products and the scale to deliver when and where you need them, the right tools and supplies are never far away. So the one can keep that vintage building running like new. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
At Stormont Vale Health, our patients are our neighbors and our communities are home.
We invest in your health and our community by bringing high-quality healthcare closer to home. From our Wamego Clinic to our new campus in Manhattan and the Flint Hills Hospital in Junction City. Our partnerships with organizations like the Mayo Clinic and the Children's Miracle Network bring top-notch expertise to our region. We take pride in local collaboration to stay connected to our communities. Visit StormontVale.org.
Stormont Vale Health, high-quality care closer to home.
You've probably heard our Sugar Creek Country Store jingle.
You'll always find a smile at Sugar Creek.
We sing about it because it's true. Stop by Sugar Creek Country Store in St. Mary's and you'll be smiling and singing about the delicious handmade deli sandwiches, tasty homemade soups, baked goods, and bulk foods too. See it all by visiting sugarcreekcountrystore.com. Or better yet, come and see us at Sugar Creek Country Store in St. Mary's.
You'll always find a smile at Sugar Creek.
You guys are really good.
The Ramsey Show.
Up to 50% of American families are paying their adult children's bills to an average of $1,482 a month. Wow. I've never seen it like this. 25% of millennials, their parents are paying their housing, house payment, their rent, or they're living in their basement. You pay your kids' bills. Psychologists call that enabling. As a matter of fact, enabling is quite the opposite of loving.
Go from paycheck to purpose with The Ramsey Show. Weekdays 10 to 1 on News Radio, KMAN. KMAN's Morning News. Tomorrow morning, 6 to 9. This is Within Reason with Mike Matson on News Radio, KMAN.
Our guest is Alan Cobb. He is the president and chief executive officer of the Kansas Chamber, which is the state's leading private sector business organization, advocacy group. Alan, a lot of lobbying groups in Topeka clearly get involved in political work. You guys aren't shy about doing that. You have an entire component of your system, Political Action Committee, aimed at electing people who will help implement the policies that your membership wants. Is that controversial at times?
It has been. It hasn't been for a while. I mean, it's really nothing unusual. We have a PAC. Our PAC supports candidates that support the Kansas Chamber agenda. Nothing unusual. It shouldn't be, but politics is kind of rough and tumble, and it's not beanbagged. So some folks can or will take offense to any of our messaging about supporting a candidate or not supporting a candidate. So it has been, but it's been a while. I think there's a reason companies join the chamber, so we're taking that heat, or our PAC is taking the heat, not them.
Right.
But of course, it's all publicly disclosed. The folks who contribute to the PAC, and then our expenditures are also public. What we're spending on who and how. We do independent expenditures, meaning we'll say yes, vote for, or vote against, and. So it also helps us with our legislative agendas, because you get the better folks that are elected, they're going to be more likely to support our policy agenda.
It's just a circle, right? You do this and that will lead to that. And so in what you describe are not, these are best practices in the political industry. You're not alone in doing these things.
Correct. No different than the teachers union or folks that may not be, or might be considered kind of the opposite of us. It's a free country, and I'm glad that we're able to do that.
When you think about, again, we're visiting with Alan Cobb. He's the president and CEO of the Kansas Chamber. Alan, when you think about your membership, and we've talked about just how they represent the gamut of businesses from small to large to manufacturing to merchants, the whole works. Is there one or two things that you hear regularly over the last 2 or 3 years from your membership?
A lack of workforce. And also the concern is both the quality and the quantity. Concerns with what would be called soft skills. We do an annual CEO poll of Kansas CEOs and whether they're members of the chamber or not. And soft skills always come up top, not failed drug tests, not lack of degrees or credentials. It's the soft skills. And now, granted, that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of folks, but it's being able to communicate, analytical, play well with others, show up on time. Getting your job done. And I know there's some employers that they'll hire on character and with those soft skills, and then they'll train them. Now, it's hard to train an engineer to be an accountant, so there are some limits to that, but that's certainly something that has been very consistent.
Is that a post-COVID phenomenon?
Oh, no, that was pre-COVID.
Is it?
Yeah. I mean, that's been consistent. I do feel, and there is some data to support this, that fewer people going into the workforce, more people graduating high school in Kansas and elsewhere who literally aren't doing anything. They're not working, and they're not going to get a degree, an associate, or whatever. That, I think, is in the last decade, and I don't know why that's happened.
But that has to be frustrating, right?
Of course.
Especially to business individuals who will rely on external workforce, right? They need human beings to help staff their system, to help them succeed. And so has it reached the point where you would describe it as a crisis, or is it just chronic? What adjective would you use to describe the notion of workforce challenges in Kansas?
Probably less than a crisis, but we're kind of looking at it. I mean, it's probably in that neighborhood. It certainly is a chronic issue, and it's not unique to Kansas. It's every industry in every part of the country. And the question is, can we do it better than the other states to address it? And I think you mentioned the affiliations of the tech colleges, things like that. Yeah, those are going to make a difference.
Well, and some of that stuff has nothing to do with business best practices. Some of that stuff just has to do with the culture that we are currently living in. Is that a fair assessment?
No question. Lots of things are changing where folks are getting married much, much later. They're having kids later and later. And there's lots of things that are happening on kind of the demographic front, but also just on the social front that are just different than when you and I grew up.
Our guest is Alan Cobb. He's the president and chief executive officer of the Kansas Chamber. They are the state's leading and likely most influential business lobby. They have a presence in 80 counties, which means that you have 25 more to go.
I know. We're going to knock those off.
Okay, fair enough. Talk to us just a little bit about you as an individual human being and leader. What excites you about the work that you do?
I'm deeply committed to the health of my home state, and so that it's a great job. I feel like I'm making a difference, and that the Kansas Chamber makes a difference. And you could be the president of the Kansas Chamber without having been a native. I think it helps me, though. Well, again, I'm mostly a native, except for those 6 weeks. And so that is very, very satisfying, and being able to see all these wonderful business successes across the state, from small to large, and really exciting things that are happening.
You are a chief executive officer, which means that when you look at the professional staff organization chart of the Kansas Chamber, you're on top.
Correct.
A lot of people who report to you.
True, but although I report to a board,
Fair.
I report to a chair,
Fair enough.
a volunteer chairperson, and that certainly has its challenges. I'm a consensus builder in some ways, but also one of the gurus, the development or the business talk guru, said consensus is not leadership. And so I always have to keep that in mind. Ultimately, a decision has to be made on X, Y, and Z, but I also look to other people's opinion and I solicit feedback. And I'm a big fan of Eisenhower, and that's how Eisenhower was able to make so many difficult decisions in World War II and as president. He solicited feedback, but ultimately he was the decider.
You have an enormous board of directors, right? 50, right? And so I would assume that there's a subset.
Yeah, there's an executive committee of about 16.
Okay, and so that is in essence your boss, right?
Correct.
And when you get them in a room and you guys have those conversations, what's that look like for you all?
They're productive. That we do our job as a staff of trying to determine in advance of what are the topics, what are the decisions that need to be made, and so no one's caught off guard or caught by surprise.
Fair enough. Our guest has been Alan Cobb. Alan, thanks very much for your time.
Sure, my pleasure.
Appreciate you coming over to have this conversation with us on this program. Today wraps up 8 weeks of Within Reason. That is 5 days a week. That is 40 individual, unique guests, each bringing a story, each bringing something they want to talk about, people like Alan Cobb today. We intend for this program to be a vehicle to fill in knowledge gaps. The idea is to offer new data, new information, to learn more about the challenges that are facing our region and the conversations that are underway that will help deal with them and offer change. The guests on this program are my ideas. I've learned, though, that I've lived long enough to know that my ideas are made better by input from others. So if you have thoughts on who you would like to have on as a guest, buttonhole me on the street, tackle me by the ankles. If you can't get through to me that way, send me an email, mike.matson@manhattanbroadcasting.com. Join us Monday. Our guest will be Tracy Anderson. He is a local architect and one of the creative forces behind the proposed riverfront project in Manhattan. On Tuesday, we'll be joined by former Kansas Governor John Carlin, who is a fan of this program. He heard us the first week, called us up and said, "What a great idea." I said, "Governor, you got to come on." He'll be with us next week. Thanks for listening. This is Within Reason on News Radio KMAN.
KS State